But before, like, we get into all of those, I just wanna like, um, give you like some examples of how important it is, how important the design system is in like building an enterprise application, and just kind of like give you some things that I've experienced in Optum, right? Yeah, so I'm a senior software engineer in Optum. The things that I'm working on right now are related to like payment systems. For example, if someone wants to pay for uh stuff like in their in insurance, like a prescription that they ordered, right? They use our widget to like to just go through the payment flows. So that's what I'm working on. But my experience with the need of a design system, right? So for example, I architected like uh this micro front end architecture when I was in a team called Tech Hub, which later transitioned into a healthcare platform. So my job was to integrate. Is anyone here familiar with like a micro front end architecture? No, not yet. You guys? Micro front end. All right. So basically, micro front end is like you have a when you kind of like divide this you have different teams owning different parts of your web applications, and each of those web applications kind of like injects itself into the main shell of the application, right? So that's basically like how I would describe a micro front end, where like each part, let's say for example, um, let's say in Figma, right? Like this navigation over here would be like one part of a micro front end, and it injects itself uh, via runtime using JavaScript into like a shell application. So my part was uh, integrating all those different teams. We had like 30 something teams that 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 um that's injecting itself into the shell application. So now what made it hard for my job was Optum is not really good with design system, right? We have different some teams using Material UI, some teams using Chakra, um, and some teams are using Bootstrap, and like having those different um, component libraries, right, makes it difficult for someone integrating in a microfront and architecture, like managing all those different applications, because now they're um, defining their own themes, and things are looking inconsistent when you kind of like merge into like one big ecosystem. It's like their buttons looks different than how this other team would look on their buttons. So that's one part of like the importance of like a design system. Now, on the other side of it is I have started many projects in Optum, like like just starting from a project from like ground up, right? And without like a predefined design system, like I have to like go I have to like uh each time I have to start a project, I would have to like type in all the hex values again into like create a new components for like a button, and what are the different hex values that just to that goes into this button and things like that. So that's so tedious, right? Like each time you have to like do that and start a project, you'd have to like redefine those components again. So that made it really difficult for me. So now that you know I'm like disgruntled employee, right? So I just want to like point that out, how this is so important when you're as a software engineer, like how like a component library that was built, a component library can make it easier for you like to build applications and things like that. But how do we bridge that gap, that token that we, because like we're expecting like two things, well, a couple of things from UX people, right? One of those things are the wireframes, right? So the Figma, right? And then when you're building when you're authoring your own library, right? Or you're part of a team that's authoring a library, like how do we make it in a way where it's more automatic, right? You don't want to, because there's like so many of values that you have to keep track of, so many different token token names, right? Like you don't want to just like I've heard teams in Optum where they kind of like hard code it, right? And that's so tedious. You don't want to do that, right? Thank goodness there's some plugins that would help us that kind of like streamlines that process, right? So one of those plugins are like what she said, the design what's that? Design manager, right? So that's just one part, like but how do we translate that into something that us engineers can use, right? So I just want to show you an example of what gets exported using those token manager, right? So for example, where is so this one, right? Hold on a second. Let me expand this. All right. All right, so this is what we get from Figma, like this thing, right? So this, I mean, looking at it, yeah, I get it. Like, there's some values here and stuff that I can make sense of, but how do we make it into what we heard earlier, the different tiers and to a much more friendlier token name that we could use from in our app, right? So that we had to like process these tokens into like a different object, right? And processing this object, you'd want to you want to use a tool that can make it easier for you. So the thing that we used here in our project here is a tool called a library called Style Dictionary, right? And with another set of plugin called Token Studio, right? Um, that style dictionary, we have a script that has like a configuration, right? And also uh, a transformer and a formatter that would convert these design tokens into something that we could use, right? So if I go through our script right now, let me see. I'm not gonna explain to you, this is not it. Where is that script? Style dictionary. This is probably it. So I just want to show you what that config would look like, right? So this is what I'm talking about. So it has some configuration that we could use, the different attributes that we could use to transform our token into something else, and we also use some custom formatter to change the way to change how we output that tokens into a JavaScript object files. So I'm not the genius behind this script. I'm actually just filling in for that person. He's actually on Donat is on a travel right now. He went to see his family. But I want to give a big shout out to him, right? He's like the genius over here. So Donat, if you can hear us, hey. Right, so this is the script that we use, right? And we transform it into like I said, like a JavaScript object, which is, let's go through the base first, right? So the base would give us, like, I believe this is the first tier that we saw in
Yeah.
Figma, right? So this is the first tier. So this is one of the, you got it, right? You know, the primitives, there you go. So this is, so this is like one of the things that script kind of like, uh, uh, outputs into this file, right? And
Color, like, is, Visual Studio Code doing that, or is there,
Oh, it's a, how do you call it, an extension
Yeah.
on Visual
It's
Studio.
pretty nice.
yeah, yeah. I was kind of like impressed by it too. What extension is this?
Oh, let me see. You know what? I'll figure it out and like let you know.
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't
share
wanna-
you
yeah.
all our extensions, all the tricks and stuff that we're doing, like in the Slack or something, you know? Yep, so the other thing is, so once we have, so this is one way we transform that design token, and we use this values, this primitive values in another file, right? And that's in the semantic ones, right? So I think this is starting to look familiar based on Priyanka's talk earlier, right? Yeah, so now we kind of like reference those primitive values into this semantic object, right? So this is all automated. Can you just imagine like just trying to do this all manually? It's gonna be, you're probably gonna hate engineering if you try to do it manually. So always try to look for some things to like automate your job. Like that's probably like the key thing. Like always, there's a bunch of plugins out there that could um automate your job. And the one that we've used is Style Dictionary with Token Studio, and yeah. Let me see. So this is just one part of what I want to get through, right? So you have, you know, you have that, you have those tokens that we're getting from Figma, but like, how do we turn that into like a component library, right? Like, how do we turn it into something like MUI or Bootstrap or things like that? Now, where you're, I want to show you like different patterns that we use in making a component library, right? So now we're getting into like the area where how to build components when you're authoring library, right? There's a couple of, well, a uh few patterns that I have seen where it's mostly used in like in component libraries. Let me just refer to my notes. Right, and some of it are probably just probably gonna be like looking, you'd probably done many of it. But I just like, it's kind of like, it would be nice to like kind of like show you and just, I guess, emphasize like the importance of like these kind of patterns. As an engineer, I think um it would really help you a lot to always look for patterns, like common patterns, what other engineers are using out there to like build their components. There's so many different patterns out there, and you just like, if you're gonna be like if you're gonna be uh focusing your career in like React based applications, just look up, okay, different design patterns for React. You find so many. If you're going to be doing Angular, there's different patterns for Angular also. But the ones I've seen for React are child pass-through, forward ref, prop spreading, and opinionated default. I'm going to show you some examples on these kind of patterns in what we have built already. And most likely, you guys are going to be using these patterns also. So child pass-through, right? Let's see. Right, so child pass-through, we normally use it for creating like dynamic content. You have like a parent, you have a parent component and you're passing like a child to like create dynamic content, right? So one example one example is like this pattern over here. Pretty sure you guys have seen this kind of pattern before, right? Where you have this parent component over here, and then you're just kind of like passing as a props, right? Those React nodes, right? And so this is really important again when you're like when you're trying to make when you don't know what kind of children you're passing through the parent, and you want to make it more dynamic, right? Like how do we style this children components, right? So when we don't really know what those components is going to be, right? So that's a child pass through, right? Another 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 pattern is forward ref, right? Forward ref, I'm gonna refer to one of Ansom component that she created. So forward ref is a little different. It's very special in a way where um uh you 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 expose your, because a lot of the components that you're going to be creating are have a native HTML counterpart, right? And you want to expose that reference, that HTML reference, only on certain use case scenarios, right? Let's say, for example, a tooltip, right? A tooltip, right? Where when you hover on that button, you want something to pop up, right? So those are one use case scenarios where you want to expose those reference. But a lot of times, you probably don't want to expose that reference because these has breaking changes, and you, as much as possible, you want to try to avoid breaking changes on your libraries, right? So a breaking change, that's a great question, right? And so a breaking change is, for example, is if you, so your properties has certain, I'm sorry, your component has certain properties, right? And and this is actually going to get to the next pattern that we're going to talk about. Now, a breaking change is a change on any of those properties, right? Um that would I guess require those consumers. Well, when I say consumers, those developers that are using your library to change something in their code, right?
You're using forward ref, like just thinking about the hovering example.
Right.
Tip example.
Yeah.
So something that wouldn't, like, it wouldn't dynamically change if that's what you're using.
Yes, something in that property. Now you made a change in that ref. Something in that property would require each of your clients that are using your library to make a change on their code base because you changed something in that property, right? So that's a breaking change.
Yeah, like for example, if you decide to make edits to the button and then
Mhm.
instead of calling one of the props like on click, you call it on button click. So now everyone who's using your library, when they upgrade to that version, on click is no longer, doesn't
Right.
exist anymore. They have to go in and change their code. Wherever they use on click, they have to use on button click. So it's really important whenever you make changes and you publish your library, that it has to be as much as possible, like backward compatible with the way that everyone is
Yes.
using
And
it.
this is when using the forward.
It applies to pretty much everything.
It's a
Not
general
just-
term used for rating changes, so you can look up semantic versioning. So when the
Okay.
major
Yeah.
version changes,
That way.
that means there's a rating change.
Okay.
So semantic versioning is what you should look up.
Yep.
So 3.0 versus 4.
Sounds like.
Yeah, so that's semantic versioning, right? So that's one of the things that that's good to point out, and when like pretty sure you've used you've installed different libraries in your applications, and in your library there's like three numbers on, so that is semantic versioning. We'll get into that much later, right? But as far as forward ref pattern, right? So there's a couple things here, right? So over here, what forward ref pattern is, this is actually so this reference over here, right, is exposing the native counterpart of your of your uh of your component, your so this is like the native counterpart. This is actually the button that we're trying to expose, right? So whoever is consuming this button, right, we're exposing the HTML, the DOM element, right, of your application to whoever's consuming your component, right? So remember, React is virtual DOM, right? So now you've exposed your that native HTML element to your consumer, right? So this is what I meant by forward ref, right? So this is a different pattern of, this is not like an everyday use case of of um building components. Normally, when I build components, I would, as much as possible, I would stay away from forward ref. But you have to ask yourself, why would I expose my DOM to the consumer, right? So there's different things that you can use to so there's different utility types in React TypeScript that you can use to like to to I guess to create your to copy the props of the HTML element. So I guess that's the next part, which is called prop spreading, right? So the next component pattern is prop spreading, right? Now, in TypeScript, right, we are heavily focused on types, right? And you're gonna learn that hopefully in our workshop, right? And TypeScript is great because you catch bugs a lot sooner than JavaScript, right? In JavaScript, you kind of like discover bugs uh when you run your application, right? Something is like missing, index out of bounds or something like that when it comes to like array, or instead of a number you're passing a string, or things like that. It looks the format of it looks different on screen, right? So but with TypeScript, that's different. You catch that on compile time versus runtime. So when I say compile time, you catch it on while you're viewing it in VS Code, right? You'd see that red squiggly error, right? That's because TypeScript helps us identify the difference in types that we're passing in our component, right? And prop spreading. So going back to prop spreading, right? Um, so when we're doing prop spreading, so this is one part of prop spreading, right? So that dot props, right? So that means um you have all these we're destructuring all these variables from the remaining of the props, right? And then applying and then um and then spreading out the rest of the props in this value called props, right? So I'm hoping I didn't get you lost on that part. So, but let me just explain it in a different way. All right. So for example, uh, HTML button has many properties. One of it is on click, one of it is type, one of it is children or disabled. It has so many different props, right? Each time you wanna, each time you wanna, you don't wanna define all those properties each time you create a button, right? So there's a different way, there's an easier way of uh copying, let's just say copying all those properties that of the native HTML counterpart, right? And spreading it in and doing this prop spreading on that, right? So one of it is props with this, one of it, the and use was called props with children, right? So this is saying, okay, copy all the HTML properties of button props, and into this custom button, right? And then spread all of those properties into this props variable. So if we hover over this props, actually, if we hover over, I'm going to show you a different example. I'm going to show you in typography, right? So for example, I did I did a different way of prop spreading over here. So component props without ref, right? So I copied all the properties of a div element by using a utility called component props without ref, right? So if I hover over this props over here, there's many different other properties that is for that HTML div element. So that's copying all the properties using utility component that's built in within React TypeScript, right? So now I have access to attributes called title. I have access to an attribute called key and all those things. And now so I don't have to like redefine all those properties, and I'm just using prop spreading to automatically assign all those values into this component. So that's, yeah, go ahead.
So where you define, and then you're using that, oh, so you then pass it into the object.
Yes. So basically, I'm using what's built in React TypeScript, right? So in those utility types has some magic behind it, right? Where it copies all those properties of the native HTML counterpart, right? And assign it into this value and just spread it all over to your custom component.
But are you defining like for
No.
example, key is this and you want.
No, that's
Oh,
actually built in React.
into this component.
Right, right. So React TypeScript, this is like we're heavy, like, again, we're heavy on defining the different types of a component, right? It helps you with your text editor, right? With the tool you have in the text editor to be able to, and also to be able to, you know how, for example, I'm gonna just go over here, right? I believe it's control. See, if you do a control space bar here, it gives you a access to that different properties, right? JavaScript doesn't have that, right? That all this IntelliSense stuff over here, JavaScript don't have that. So TypeScript has that, right? So that's one of the magic that happens with TypeScript, right? So yeah, control spacebar, right? So now you have access to children. Now you have access to CSS and ref well, this is, yeah, so, and all those properties, right? So that's prop spreading.
Okay.
Yeah,
Name check.
okay. So, all right, so I'm gonna,
45.
yeah, I'm gonna breeze through the rest of the remainder. So, the rest of the talk. So that's prop spreading, opinionated default, right? So opinionated default is a is a way it's a way for like I guess it's a way for us to like handle prevent errors in our components, right? So let's say, for example, one of your developers that's consuming your library didn't provide a value that's needed in your component. If that's not provided, then your component would fail, right? So an opinionated default pattern is just basically, where is that? Let me see,
In the button, there's
in the button. Let's go in the button.
like.
There you go. Yeah, so variant equals primary. So this is one example of opinionated default, right? So you're giving like a default value to this property. So which in this case is called primary, right? So it would cause your button to display in a variant called primary, right? So that's one pattern. Right, so I guess that's the last pattern I wanted to discuss. So, and I think the remaining of the topic that I think a lot of you are gonna be contributing to the code base, right? And so I just want to go over like how do we contribute into Equity UI, right? The PR and code review process, semantic versioning, right? How that plays into publishing into an NPM, where later on you could claim that, oh, I'm an author of this library in your resume, and I authored this design system component library.
Contributed to
Yeah,
open
you-
source.
You contributed to an open source, and you could, direct them to this NPM repo. So let me see, where is our repo?
Yeah, just open springs. Or yeah, you can just like,
Open Spring? No.
oh no, like
Let's
here,
see.
wait, open springs
Oh,
folder, I have it saved. Right here.
there you go. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna go to the PR that I created. So our PR, this is how our PR review, it's pretty much automated. Well, a lot of the checks are automated, right? So it's checking for some labels and uh It's checking for basically how basically when we create a PR, we're supposed to bump up the version to bump up the version, whether it's a major, minor, or patch, right? So for example, if we go to our version right now, right? Let me see, package JSON, right? So we are at version 1.10 0.1. So going back to semantic versioning, right? So the correct the correct the correct versioning so there's different parts to this number, right? So the first number is the major version, right? This is you normally bump this up when there's a breaking change in your library, right? And then the second number is the minor version, right? That's when you add a feature into your library. And then the third is when you're doing bug fixes, right? So that's normally that's when you normally bump up those versions. So in our we have in our when you're creating a pull request, right? You all those checks are pretty much automated, right? So where for example, one of the things that it's looking for is the label, right? So please set a versioning label of either major, minor, or patch, right? So in this case, I'm adding a feature, right? So if I just do minor, right? And it's right now I created the GitHub actions for for our repo, and there's a bug in it. I've yet to like fix it, right? So when you click on when you add the minor, it's going to actually run the GitHub workflow, right? And go through the process and check if it's checking if it has the appropriate label,
That just appeared, yeah.
right? So another thing is unit test, right? So what we kind of like expect of you to when you're doing your pull request, I guess one of the parts that we want you to do is add a unit test for your components, right? So like you could just use chat GPT. So that's what I did with my component. I kind of like copied and pasted the component. Hey, generate a testing a test unit test for this component below using React testing library, right? But use that as like a starting point, right? Use any generative AI as a starting point to like do your unit test, but also try to understand what it's doing, right? So that's that's one of the things that I didn't learn as part of when I graduated when of Flatiron. I didn't know how to unit test at all, but when I got into the real world out there, they were asking me, write a unit test for your component. I'm like, what? What's a unit test, right? That's something that you'd wanna pick up, right? How to write a unit test, and what's being used out there right now is mostly is called React testing library. That's pretty much the standard right now. And that's what we're using in this project. So use what you get from use AI tools that you would get, free AI tools that you would get out there, and use that as a starting point, but also try to understand what's going on behind what it's giving you, right? So we're gonna learn React testing library here, other than TypeScript, right? And also other parts that's that's involved in this code review process is we go through your code, right? We're gonna inspect everything that's line by line, what you put out there, and make some recommendation on how to improve um codes that you're pushing. And we're gonna have like maybe one-on-ones on trying to make that better or improve that code. So that's what we're trying to do in this code contribution in this open source project. I know I've taken up so much more time, but yeah, is there any question on?
Just one thing, so the version number, last year's for patents,
Yes,
minus for future upgrades. And then first one.
the major version. That's when the breaking changes. So when you introduce like a breaking change.
Like if you wanna rewrite your whole
Yeah.
entire button component,
Yeah.
Okay.
do something like that.
Yeah, I've seen some libraries out there. I think, that's published out there doesn't really go through semantic versioning. I think Jest is one of them. If you, yeah, Jest doesn't use semantic versioning, I think. But that's pretty much a industry standard where they follow that SEM versioning. Yeah. Is there any other question? Cool.
I think it'll start to make sense once you actually do it. But yeah. Yeah, a lot of these things, yeah, I keep hearing when I started, I was like, oh, semantic versioning, like this and that. But like, once you actually are involved in it and you have to like bump up a version because you're making a contribution, it starts like to click. And the PR review process is really helpful because, yeah, if you are not aware of something or made like a mistake, like we'll like help you out.
Yeah, because like normally when we were in Flatiron, you're kind of like doing your own code review, right? And that's not how it works out there, right? Someone else is gonna look at your code and like ask you, hey, change this. Don't get offended by
Yeah.
those. Because like I've seen a lot of engineers get offended by code review process. So you have to open yourself up to those kind of criticism. Like they expect they want you to change the way you wrote your code. And you have to be open, you have to like learn that kind of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like- I
Yeah,
think
network
it,
does, it's like, you
it's
have the
helpful.
dust engineers.
yeah.
Right,
It's
right.
like I
Not that-
always try to think it from the perspective, it's like someone took their time to like critically look at your code and give you feedback.
Yeah,
Even if you disagree, you can have a conversation.
yeah,
But it's like, I have seen people who don't really do code reviews, like they'll get a PR and they'll approve.
yes,
And you don't really learn from that, like,
yeah,
especially like starting out. It's so helpful.
yeah,
And like he said, like even senior engineers, like we use this as a forum to like discuss
yeah,
what is appropriate, what are new conventions, blah, blah, blah. So really not an ego hit, or
Yeah.
you shouldn't try to.
Also, especially if you're Python, you learn about a ton of random built-in things. You
Yeah.
never thought about, trust me, that's how I thought.
Well, cool. I guess what's our next,
It's me. We're
So-
building stuff. But are we still good? Do you guys need a break? Can we jump right to it? Should we?
Yeah.
Okay, let's regroup
Let's-
at 3:10.
all right, so I'm gonna stop sharing, right?
I think you can just leave it.
Just leave it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just mute and